One of the delights of working with George is he reminds me of my very beloved brother Sam in some ways, as a human, not the son. And Sam said something, I was talking about this with Sam, and he said, the thing about courage, for courage to be courage, you have to be scared shitless. So I'm not fearless. You know, I'm terrified about pretty much everything I have to do, and the key is to find something that is so essential, so unavoidable, something that I have to overcome my fears, and it has to be important enough and developed enough and intricate enough for me to feel it's worth taking the risks. So it's absurd that I was as terrified at the prospect of directing actors or writing lyrics that actually rhyme as I was working with death squad leaders who were making their own musical for the act of killing. But and of course the way one overcomes those very different kinds of fear is different, but no, yeah, you have to be terrified.
I think what Josh was looking at, this sort of very nuanced and particular theme of self-deception, really. It feels so pertinent to sort of socially and globally so many of the things we need to address, because it is rooted in a very personal thing that I think, you know, we all, you know, build narratives for ourselves in our own lives, and it's a very human thing, but it's also can be very destructive as well. And I thought the fact that Josh was looking at this so articulately with such a kind of beautifully bizarre concept, but the concept was so attached to that theme, like it had to be a musical for that reason and because of the theme, and it wasn't just therefore like let's smash genres together to be sort of kooky or something. It felt very clear as a sort of visual and like artistic statement, as well as then knowing Josh's track record of the films that he's made. I saw The Act of Killing in the cinema on my own, which was an incredibly intense experience. And at the time as well, Tilda was with the project, as well as our DOP, Michal Krichman as well. And just the constellation of people already involved, coupled with the accuracy of Josh's vision and his passion, I wanted to do it immediately.
Yeah, after making The Act of Killing and The Look of Silence, I wanted to make a third film about the billionaires, essentially, who came to power and to wealth through the genocide in Indonesia, and who enriched themselves because they basically were building businesses in a country where everybody was terrified. So I started work on a documentary with a family of an oil tycoon who was also politically powerful in his country. We traveled to an underground bunker that he wanted to buy for his family, and I was struck by the silences, the things that they could not talk about on the trip, that no one mentioned, were that if they were to live in such a place, all of their wealth, their art, their status, because they had a big art collection they wanted to bring, like in the end, what would it mean? If they moved their family into this abyss of darkness and meaninglessness, how would they cope with their legacy before the world ended, their contribution to the demise of the planet? How would they cope with not having brought people they loved or cared for? And all of those questions were stuck in my heart because they couldn't talk about any of it, and I couldn't ask them about it. I could see these were no-go areas, sort of essential to the idea of a bunker. And when I left that place, ruminating and on these questions and haunted by them, it just occurred to me, the next film I make will not be with this family as a documentary. It will be about a family in a bunker 25 years after the world has ended, and it will be called The End, and it will be inspired by those bouncy, buoyant 1950s musicals from America, and the lead will be played by George. The fact that it's a musical is what makes the film a meditation on storytelling, how we tell stories to obscure the world from ourselves. It's what makes it a meditation on self-deception, on denial, and specifically a false kind of hope. I say a false hope because we have, I think, in our culture, two very different kinds of hope, but we don't have good words, good language for distinguishing between them. There's the hope rooted in the delusion that no matter what happens, no matter what we do, everything will work out for the best. A kind of baseless optimism that I think animates those 1950s golden age musicals that this film is referencing. It had to be a musical to make it about what it's about, which is the perils of self-deception. When I expressed my terror about having to write lyrics, Josh Schmidt gave me this double volume of Stephen Sondheim lyrics, and he's like, and Josh is not actually a huge fan of Sondheim's music, or at least that's not a key influence to him. I don't mean he doesn't like it, but he did say what's brilliant about Sondheim's lyrics is that they're conversational, they're never self-consciously poetic, and they are always dramatically active.
We discussed so much, because as well it was, I think the script developed as we had those conversations, but that said as well, because the music was so laid out, the script was, I kind of saw it as like Tweed, the pattern, where it's patterns upon patterns upon patterns to create an overall pattern. And those through lines had to be so true and so accurate that it was kind of about adding the context that we discussed and the history that we discussed to the pre-established script, because the road had to be very, very clear.
Jacques Demy was my first reference when I saw after visiting the bunker that inspired the film. Joshua Schmidt, the composer, and I took that Michel Legrand score and thought, can we create melodies? A melody was the initial goal that is as beautiful as that kind of refrain from Umbrellas of Cherbourg, and I think Josh more than exceeded that in his incredible score for the film. And yeah, in terms of the singing, I'll let George speak to that, but it wasn't something the cast was reluctant to do. I feel like that was part of the draw. Oh, we get to sing. But
yeah, totally. It's, why not? Like, it's an amazing, that's the beauty of the job that we get to do and these opportunities, is you get to try something that, like, maybe privately you've been a bit self-conscious to try, and you get to work with the best people to make you better at it, and it feels great. It feels amazing. Like when you sort of reach for those, when you sing big, it's just like a big shout, basically, and it feels very emotional and freeing. It's just a wonderful thing. So, of course, there's trepidation about sounding terrible in front of your peers, but that happens, and then you do enough work and you sound better, and then it's all good. So, yeah, it was definitely the singing and the movement was something that I was really drawn to as well in the storytelling.